Ali Dawah goes on to argue that the Christian view of Jesus as fully God and fully man is like a triangle square. It's a contradiction. Why? Because Jesus' divine nature is independent, doesn't depend on anything else for its existence, while his human nature is dependent. It depends on something else for its existence. According to Ali Dawah, something can't be both dependent and independent because that would be a contradiction. But GodLogic shows why it's definitely not a contradiction.
Because Jesus has a divine nature, he has a nature that is independent. Okay?
You can't be dependent and independent at the same time.
Yeah, well, I agree that you can't be dependent and independent at the same time in the same sense.
Yeah.
I'm not saying that. Jesus is independent in regards to his divine nature, dependent in regards to his human nature.
The law of contradiction is that a statement can't be both true and false at the same time in the same sense. The statement, David Wood is in Great Britain, can be true at one time and false at a different time. That's not a contradiction. If I say the sun rises in the east, that's true in one sense, it's true from our perspective, but in a different sense, it's false, because the sun isn't actually rising, the earth is rotating. So the statement, the sun rises in the east, is true in one sense, but false in another sense, not a contradiction. Likewise, if I say the sun sets in a muddy pool, that's true in one sense, it's true according to the Quran, Surah 18:86, but in a different sense, it's false, because here on planet reality, the sun doesn't set in a muddy pool. So the statement, the sun sets in a muddy pool, is true according to the Quran, but false according to reality, not a contradiction. Since Ali Dawah doesn't understand what a contradiction is, he keeps insisting that Jesus, in Christian theology, is like a triangle square. So, GodLogic points out something else.
A triangle square cannot be the same thing, right? Now let me ask you this. Can a triangle and a square be put next to each other?
Yeah.
Okay, is that a contradiction?
No.
Okay, so I'm not saying that the divine nature and the human nature are intertwined and mixed and are the same exact thing. I'm saying that they're next to each other. They're united in the person of Jesus.
So, Christians aren't saying that Jesus' human nature is both dependent and independent. We're not saying that Jesus' divine nature is both dependent and independent. We're saying that Jesus' human nature is dependent and that his divine nature is independent and that the two natures are united.
David Wood, same David Wood who tried to kill his father with a hammer, was put into a mental hospital by his mother and was cursed with two disabled kids. That David Wood is trying to rescue his secret hotel boyfriend, GodLogic, aka GodLogic, aka Avery, from his mistake. The mistake is that none of these guys, Ali Dawah, GodLogic, David Wood, etc., cited the New Testament verses in their discussion because the New Testament clearly says that Jesus and God are separate and not co-equal. So if you read the New Testament, we can see that Jesus, that the divine God is separate from the human Jesus, and that means these two are not united in the personhood of Jesus Christ. We're going to be looking at some New Testament verses that prove this. But first, let's look at David Wood's secret hotel boyfriend, GodLogic, aka GodLogic. Oh yeah, so this is David Wood and his secret hotel boyfriends, Avery and what do you mean? I think his real name is John. I believe his real name is John. So John and Avery are David Wood's secret hotel boyfriends because David Wood accuses Mohammed Hijab of having a secret hotel wife. Well, we know David Wood has secret black boyfriends in hotel rooms. So this is David Wood's secret hotel boyfriends, Avery and John, what do you mean, and GodLogic, the YouTubers. So we know David Wood has secret hotel boyfriends, but don't tell his wife Marie. She might divorce him. Before we get into the New Testament and the Jesus and God and Jesus being separate in the New Testament, let's look at what's some of the other point that the psychopath David Wood made. He made he made a short claim about the Quran, and I'm going to be, or alleged scientific error in the Quran, and I'm going to be addressing it right now. Before we get there, psychopath David Wood made a claim about the Quran which needs to be addressed. He cited Quran chapter 18 verse 86. The Quran doesn't make a scientific error here. The word in question translated as found is wajada. So that Arabic word is used to describe from the sight, or from perspective, from perception. See the proof from the Edward William Lang's lexicon. So we're going to look at the Arabic word wajada, and whether it means something literally setting into something, or whether it means perception, like from the perception of the eyes. So let's take a look here. According to Edward William Lang's Arabic to English lexicon, page 2924, the word wajada refers to perception through any of the five senses. So it means like perception through the eyes, etc. What we find is that the Quran has used that word wajada from the perspective of Dhul-Qarnayn, and merely describes his perception and how it appeared in his sight. And the description is very much valid for on a shore. That is how the sunset actually seems. So like when you go to the beach and you look at the sunset, it seems like the sun is like setting down in the ocean, but that's not what reality, that's not the reality. The reality is that the sun appears to be going down into the ocean, because that's what the eye sees from the shore, from the beach. You see, the next picture I'm going to show shows the sunset that appears to be sinking in the ocean, but in reality isn't. So this is what the Quran is talking about. So the next picture is what the Quran is talking about. The next picture is what Dhul-Qarnayn saw, the sun setting down, and that's what the Quran is talking about. So the Quran is talking about Dhul-Qarnayn seeing the sun, set, possibly in the Black Sea or the Caspian Sea. So let's take a look at the picture of what Dhul-Qarnayn actually saw, and this is what the Quran is talking about. So this is what the Quran is talking about when it says he found the sun setting in a muddy pool or a muddy spring. So this is what the Quran is talking about. It's talking about the sun, like the sun setting through the perception of the eye of Dhul-Qarnayn in possibly the Black Sea or the Caspian Sea. So like when anybody goes to the beach and they're looking at the sunset, the sunset or the sun appears to be sinking in the ocean. Like from the human eye, it looks like that. It looks like the sun dipping down into the ocean. But from the scientific view, we know that's not the case, and that's what the Quran is talking about. The Quran is talking about Dhul-Qarnayn's perception from the ocean, and this is what Dhul-Qarnayn saw: the sun setting, the sun appearing to set in an ocean. And then the Quran is describing it in a way that humans would understand, like looking at a sunset from a beach line. So that's what the Quran is talking about. The Quran is talking about Dhul-Qarnayn looking at a sunset from a beach and describing it as any person would see it from a beach. The sunset from a beach. It looks like the sun is. See, if you look at this picture, it looks like the sun's going down into the ocean. But we know that's not the case. We know that's just from the perspective of the eye. So does this picture prove that the sun goes down in the ocean? That like the sun literally dips down in the ocean? No, it's just from the perspective of the eye. That's what the Quran is talking about. You see, so the problem with David Wood is he doesn't, like, his logic and common sense goes out the window because he's so filled with hatred and jealousy and anger towards Islam and the Quran that he can't read the Quran correctly. Same thing with this wife-beating idiot Sam Shamoun. So these guys can't read what the Quran actually says. The Quran is talking in something called phenomenal language. That means language that is described that means like figure or descriptive language that we use to describe something, but it means from the perspective of the five senses. So that's what the Quran is talking about. But again, this is David Wood's stupidity or his blind hatred and anger towards the Quran. He can't read the Quran correctly because he's so filled with, attention seeking, hate mongering for Islam and the Quran. Okay, so the early and classical Muslim scholars have always understood this verse like this. See Tafsir Jalaluddin, co-authored by Al-Suti. He writes in Tafsir Jalaluddin, it's setting in a spring described as seen from the perspective of the eye. So, this is Tafsir Jalaluddin. You can see it online. Just look up his Tafsir online. Ibn Kathir writes, and Ibn Kathir knew the Arabic language, like the back of his hand. He knew Arabic very well. He says he saw the sun as if it were setting in the ocean. This is something which everyone who goes to a coast can see. It looks like the sun is setting into the sea, but in fact it never leaves its path which it is fixed. This is Tafsir Ibn Kathir. So even Ibn Kathir says that the sun setting is from the perspective of the eye, and it's not literally setting down in a body of water. Same thing with Nasul al-Bahadi. He said perhaps he reached the shore of an ocean and saw that it was there. There was nothing in his sight except for water, and for this reason it said he perceived it to set, and not that it actually sets. This is Anwar al-Tanzil wa Ansar al-Tawhil, volume 4, page 14. So, Muslim scholars who know the Arabic, like Ibn Kathir, Jalaluddin, all these guys knew Arabic, and they all say that when the Quran is talking about the sun setting from the perspective of the eye. So, the classical Muslim scholars who know Arabic, can translate that word wajada to mean like he saw it as if it was setting in the ocean. The Quran does not say it was setting in the ocean. Same thing with Jalaluddin. He says it's setting in a spring is from the perspective of the eye. So anybody who goes to the beach during sunset can see that the sun is setting down looks like it's setting down or descending into the ocean, but in reality that's not what's happening. That's just from the perspective of the eye. Okay, so now that we got that alleged Quranic error out of the way, let's get back to the topic at hand. I am going to show from the New Testament itself that Jesus and God are separate and not co-equal to one another. Thus, the divine nature and the human nature cannot be united in the person of Jesus Christ. I'm gonna cite New Testament verses that prove that God and Jesus are separate and not co-equal or the same. Jesus Christ cannot be God if he says that our God is his God. The below verses are very clear. Jesus Christ has a God according to the Bible or according to the New Testament. Who is the God of our Lord? Who is the God of Jesus Christ? Who is the God of Jesus Christ? Ephesians 1:17 is very clear that his God is our God. We see in Ephesians 1:17, Romans 15 verse 6, 2 Corinthians 1:3, Ephesians 1 chapter 1 verse 3, 1 Peter chapter 1 verse 3. All these verses prove that Jesus has a God. Thus, Jesus cannot be co-equal in divine nature. If somebody has a God, that means they can't be co-equal in divine nature, essence, purpose as that God. Because if somebody has a God, like if I say I have a God, I can't be co-equal with that God because that God is greater than me in purpose, essence, divinity, etc. So that means Jesus is lesser than God because these New Testament verses all prove that Jesus has a God. 1 Peter chapter 1 verse 3, etc. So if Jesus has a God, he cannot be co-equal with that God. So the question you should be asking yourself is, how can God have a God? That makes absolutely no sense. So that means Jesus has a God over him. Jesus Christ himself called our Father his God, or our God, his God, and Father many times in the Bible, in the New Testament. John chapter 20 verse 17, I ascend to my Father and your Father, and my God and your God. John chapter 20 verse 17, Jesus says, I ascend to my Father and your Father, my God and your God. That means Jesus has the same God as Mary Magdalene and the disciples, and nobody thinks, Mary Magdalene and the disciples are co-equal with God. That means Jesus has the same God as us, or the disciples, or Mary Magdalene. And we know that the disciples and Mary Magdalene were not co-equal with that God. That means Jesus has the same God that's greater, or is the same God as our God, as the rest of mankind's God. Revelation chapter 3 verse 12, Revelation chapter 3 verse 2, Revelation chapter 1 verse 6, Revelation chapter 3 verse 21 all prove Jesus has a God over him. So if Jesus has a God over him, he cannot be 100% divine and 100% human, because if somebody has a God over him, that means they can't be 100% God. Otherwise, they won't have a God over him. So any way you look at it, Jesus has a God over him, and God cannot have a God. So Jesus has a God over him. That proves that Jesus is not co-equal with God, and that proves Jesus is lesser than God. How can Jesus be like us in every way and still be 100% man and 100% God? If he has a human nature like us humans, then he is separate from his divine nature, as we humans don't have divine nature in us. Hebrews chapter 2 verse 17 clearly proves this, which I will get into in the next slide. So pay attention to Hebrews chapter 2 verse 17. It shows that Jesus is 100% man and cannot be 100% God in his in his body, in his human body, because we're going to see if Jesus has a human nature, then he cannot have a divine nature, which we're going to look at that New Testament verse right now. Hebrews chapter 2 verse 17 says, for this reason he, Jesus, had to be made like his brothers in every way. So if Jesus is God and also like us humans in every way, that means we are all 100% man and 100% God. So nobody thinks that like Jesus' brothers are 100% like have like 100% divine nature in them, right? This makes no sense. Either Jesus is not God and truly like us in all ways, like a normal human men, or he is God and so are we. So we humans are God. Because Hebrews 2:7 says that Jesus had to be made like his brothers, like normal human men. So that means that if Jesus is 100% divine, then we're 100% divine too. But nobody thinks that we humans are 100% divine, like Christians say Jesus is. So Hebrews chapter 2 verse 17 proves Jesus is a man like us, like the rest of us humans, and thus not 100% divine because of that. So Jesus cannot be 100% divine because he is made like us human men. So we know that we human men are not 100% divine in the same body. So same thing with Jesus. Jesus cannot be 100% divine and 100% human, because Jesus is made like his brothers, like his brothers mean like normal human men. So that means that if Jesus had to be made like his brothers, that means Jesus is 100% like us in every way, or Jesus is 100% man. And if Jesus is 100% man, he cannot be 100% God. That makes absolutely no sense. So either Jesus is not God and truly like us in all ways, like us means like us human men, or he is 100% God and we are also 100% God. But nobody thinks we humans are 100% God united in our body, right? So that means Jesus is 100% human. Otherwise, you have a serious contradiction in Hebrews chapter 2 verse 17. So the New Testament or scripture tells us that Jesus had to be made like his brothers, had to be made like us human men. So Hebrews 2:17 proves that Jesus is a normal human person and does not have 100% divine nature in him. Otherwise he can't be. Otherwise, Hebrews chapter 2 verse 17 at best is a serious contradiction in the theology or the Trinity, or the theology of the Trinity, because if Jesus has a God, and if Jesus had to be made like us humans, like us human men, that means that Jesus is 100% human and he's not 100% God. So any way you look at it, Hebrews chapter 2 verse 17 proves that Jesus is 100% human and not 100% man. In Jesus' body. So Jesus is 100% human according to Hebrews chapter 2 verse 17. Because like we humans are just normal humans, we don't have any divine nature in us. So Hebrews 2:17 proves that Jesus is not God and is a man, because it says had to be made like his brothers, had to be made like his men, like his fellow men. So that's pretty much the death blow to GodLogic and David Wood's argument regarding the divinity or the Trinity in the New Testament. So what is the conclusion we can draw here? The conclusion here is that David Wood and his secret hotel boyfriend, GodLogic, aka Avery, failed to prove that Jesus is 100% divine and 100% human in one person. The New Testament clearly proves Jesus has a God, and if Jesus has a God, he can't be co-equal with God, or Jesus can't be that same God. And Jesus is like us, normal non-divine men in every way. That means Jesus is 100% human according to Hebrews 2:17, the New Testament verse I just cited. If Jesus has a God, then he cannot be 100% divine in the same person or in the same body. For if somebody has a God, then they cannot be God themselves. So David Wood and GodLogic, aka Avery, failed to prove that Jesus is 100% divine and 100% human in one person, given the New Testament, given the scriptural verses or the New Testament verses I just cited. So the New Testament debunks their whole argument. Stay tuned. More videos coming up ahead.